Welcome to the Mind Like Books podcast, episode 22. We are having like an internal quarrel, I feel like, because on the previous episode, I got up early for Paolo, and we talked about horror, and today Paolo is staying up late, and we talk about classical literature.
I mean, yeah, I didn't think about it, but yes, it is kind of an exchange of favors.
Yeah, but I have to say, I liked it.
Okay.
This time.
I'm really glad about it because, well, for two reasons. First, the last time I recommended a classic literature book, it was Snow Country, and we both didn't like it. It ended up being the worst book we've read for this podcast. And secondly, because I don't want to say I care a lot about these stories specifically, because I don't. Like, I like them, but they're not that important to me. But I do really care about this kind of narrative. Mm-hmm. And this kind of literature. So the fact that you can appreciate it makes me really happy.
So today we're talking about Dostoevsky.
Just to stay on the presumptuous prick narrative.
You want to say the full name? Fyodor Mikhailovich Dostoevsky.
Okay. I don't dare.
This is one of the few times I'm confident.
Okay.
So I'm sure this is how you say that. Which, as soon as you say this name, I feel like if you're in a room of people, there has to be a person. As soon as you say Dostoevsky, somebody's gonna be like,
Someone will be like that, but someone else will have like starry eyes.
Really?
Yeah.
I don't know those
people.
Me. I guess I know you.
But I know other people like that.
Somebody told me while I get some like listener email. We don't talk about it very much. Maybe we should do like a episode only answering listener email sometime, because we got like a lot of comments. But one of the comments I got was, why don't you do like a help students pass exams podcast with classical literature? And so it's happening. Finally, we're doing it.
Do you have an exam on Dostoevsky? This might be a terrible way to try and pass it. You'll probably fail terribly if you listen to us.
When I was making notes for this episode, I was feeling like I'm studying at high school. I was like, this is a deja vu. I already did this. I was like, I already studied Dostoevsky before.
Yeah.
And I have the same reaction like Paolo said on the previous episode. He enjoys it, like the horror book, but he has this like nagging at the back of his head, and he's like, I hate this. I can't be enjoying this. It's a horror, so I can't do it. I have the same feeling. I'm reading this, and I'm like, it's kind of good, but it's Dostoevsky. I can't enjoy this. It's not allowed.
Okay, so no enjoyment allowed when reading Dostoevsky.
So I have to give credit where it's due. I like these two short stories.
Okay.
Today we're going to talk about the gentle, I want to say beast.
Well, the gentle creature. Well, so I've seen different translations. So one is a gentle creature, one is a gentle spirit. The Italian translation, which is the one I originally read, was called the meek one, which is also another English translation which I've seen.
Oh.
Meek.
Oh, meek. Okay, yeah. I thought it was one word. Sorry. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. And the second story we're going to talk about is Dream of a Ridiculous Man.
Yeah, which is an amazing title.
I wanted to say this is going to be a little bit of a weird episode. I'm trying to think like when I'm going to say what, because I wanted to mention some more stuff about the horror. And also on the previous episode, we mentioned a sequel that I missed in the Hellraiser series. And what better time to mention it than discussing Dostoevsky? I have studied and seen the story of ckraiser, but I can't do it now to the listeners, so let's not talk about it now until the end of the episode. One other thing, speaking of horror, though, I wanted to quickly say is Paolo asked me a question last episode, why do I like horror? And I gave like a plain answer, and I was thinking about it, so I have a pretentious answer.
Okay, we like pretentious in this episode.
I guess. So I meant to say the like deep, like good reason why I enjoy horror is that it really highlights flaws in human nature, and I want to say that I really enjoy that it examines people going hard in the wrong decisions, or like if it's a good horror story, of course, not like a slasher movie. So it highlights what people need, want, and how bad it can get if they get it. Like what can be the bad side of desires and things that you want and that can happen to you. And stories usually don't look at it, and that's why I like it. So I just wanted to say that.
All right, this is very interesting, because I would say that in a way the stories we've read for this episode and in general Dostoevsky stories and existentialist stories, if we ever get to Journey to the Nine in episode 100, they explore kind of the same thing, just from a very different perspective. Like it's still like an exploration of the wrongest side of humans. It's just that it's not the wrongest side in a violent and gory and extreme way. It's more of in kind of like degenerate way, but degenerate in a spiritual way. Like people who just give up on moral. And it doesn't mean that they become monsters like, violent and killers and murderers and so on, but just that they start giving up on anything that we usually refrain from doing for the sake of like society and, good morals. So
here's a pretentious reason why I like horror. Of course, I like the blood and gore too.
Yeah. But you get my pretentious seal of approval.
Okay.
It has a painting of Hegel on it.
Oh wow. Okay. So we're gonna get into the two stories, and we're gonna talk a little bit about Dostoevsky, like usual. And at the end of the episode, stay for the ckraiser discussion.
Long-awaited moment.
I have to keep the people who don't care about Dostoevsky here somehow, so hopefully they'll keep stay until the end.
People who care about ckraiser.
So Fyodor Mikhailovich Dostoevsky was born in 1821, and that already is a giant red flag. Anything that's like at this time period, I'm already out. So why do you like him?
Okay. First, I think, like in general, this is a very, very interesting time period for a lot of different reasons. I really like the history of this period, and I like a lot of different things from this period. For example, expressionist paintings. I think they're amazing. German expressionist paintings. I like the Italian literature from this period. And I think this is kind of like the beginning of, at least for books, this is kind of like the beginning of novels as we conceive them now.
Okay, that makes sense.
Because if you look at the most important classics for modern literature in almost any country, they were written in this period. Victor Hugo in France, or Manzoni in Italy, or the Bronte sisters in England.
Yeah, that's true.
There is, or like Jane Austen. It's all like this century. So
all the names that people run away from. They have to study for these exams.
Really?
Yeah, all these names are like, for me, I have to read up on the synopsis and pass the test kind of books.
Okay.
But I remember reading some short stories from Dostoevsky, and I have to admit that even then I remember some. I always remember he was like the existentialism, discussions, debates. It was the only time I kind of thought about something at school, I remember. I remember one discussion we had about if you're thinking about existentialism and like meaning of life, what it means to be alive, and what are your values, all of these things. It means that you're doing too well in life and you're a pretentious prick. I remember he said that in like a short story, because it was a discussion with a prisoner and like somebody, and the somebody was like saying, you should think about your real values and what you really mean in life and what it really is to be happy, and you can appreciate the moment. And he was like, fuck that, I'm in prison. Like, you say that, you have time to think about this. I don't have any time to think about it because I have real life things to do.
Yeah. So in my case, we didn't study Dostoevsky in school, but when I was in high school, I went through my phase where I was like, I want to read all of these, high literature books, which everyone always brags about reading. And upon recommendation from one of my best friends at the time, I read Memories of the Underground, which is an amazing book. It's still to this day maybe my favorite Dostoevsky book. I wouldn't say it's necessarily the best. Probably Crime and Punishment is the best. It's the one I would recommend to pretty much anyone.
It's the one everybody has to suffer through.
Well, I mean, that's suffer through. I wouldn't say that. Like, it's pretty short, and it is pretty normal to be a Dostoevsky book. Like, if you compare it to something like Brother Karamazov. And Memories from the Underground or Notes from the Underground, I don't know, I've seen different translations, but that one is, in a way, it's kind of like the lighter version of Journey Through the End of the Night, or, Ningen Shikaku, No Longer Human. So it really opened for me a completely new genre of self-deprecation and how a main character in a story can be, of course, the main character, but not the hero at all. And not just because they're the villain, just because they show how bad humanity is, how in the end there isn't anyone good, and the few people who are actually good are kind of stomped or constant victims.
Yeah, I understand why you, as a connoisseur of despair, like to wallow in sorrow. I was reading this and I was like, why do you like this so much? Well, then I remembered that.
Well, I also like, magic armor and swords that can cut anything.
Yeah. But I was reading this and my first thought was like, Paolo, is this you? Are you okay? What happened to you? So I understand. Okay. I never looked for these kind of stories, but I don't mind them. I think it's interesting. I just feel like sometimes it's too sad or too self-deprecating.
Okay, yeah, I agree. It's definitely not something that I don't think it's for everyone, and also I don't think it's for every moment of your life. There are moments where it's definitely not a good time to read these kind of stories.
Mm-hmm. I was looking up some facts about Dostoevsky that were interesting. And I'm going to say I didn't know, but I knew because we are from Eastern Europe, where Russia is important. So we had to study all this, but I forgot, of course. So I didn't know, in quotation marks, that he spent a bunch of time in prison.
Yes.
And he used to be in the military, like an engineer. Mm-hmm. And he had a gambling addiction.
Yes.
And he had to write a novel to pay off his debt.
Yes, right. A lot of stuff to pay his debt is gambling debts. Even write a novel about gambling because he had too much gambling debt.
He signed up a deal that if he doesn't write a book in some time limit, he's gonna have to give up all his rights to his previous 9 years of work of literature. Yeah. And he finished this book in 26 days, and it was called Gambler.
Yes.
Which is very ironic. I didn't know that. Yeah, so he also, I was reading, had kind of a rebellious youth when he started writing when he was 25, and then he joined this atheist group, and of course in Russia it was suspicious, and he got arrested, and he was taken part in a pretend execution or something.
Well, what happened is that he was sent to Siberia to serve in a labor camp. Officially he was condemned to death. They told him he would be killed, and then at the very last moment his sentence was changed to just a few years in the labor camp. But he didn't learn about it until the day of his execution. So until the end he thought he was going to die. And then right at the last moment, they were like, it's just a prank, bro. We're not killing you.
Yeah, that's the part I read about. Yeah. I was quite surprised. I think they even broke a fake sword over his neck or something stupid. They actually pretended to kill him.
Well, I don't remember the details, but it was pretty traumatic.
Yeah, that's insane. Yeah. And he was just 25 or something. So that kind of makes sense why he writes stories like that. Because I guess they will have to change a man.
Dostoevsky is one of those authors where he's a character. His life is essentially the life of one of his characters. Because especially when he was young, and you mentioned he had kind of this rebellious streak, and you got arrested because he was part of a atheist group, maybe anarchist group, I don't really remember, but anyway, at that time he didn't really write. He started writing seriously pretty late in his life, after he finished his period in Siberia. What is really interesting to me is that after he went to Siberia, essentially they broke him, and he became he became this like two-faced guy where like half of him was still like part of his like rebellious like, you know, we don't like the status quo, and you know, there's something wrong with how Russia is, and you know, fuck the nobles, fuck the rich. You know, I'm always siding with the poor side of society. But then there was the other side of him, which was extremely reactionary. Like, he became very religious, and he became, in a way, not really nationalist, but so this was a very interesting period in Russia, because like Russia culturally was not completely part of Europe. And despite the fact that militarily it was extremely powerful, culturally, like, its society was still kind of backwards, in the sense that, you know, it was still a kind of a caste system, and, you know, nobility. So it was kind of backwards, and it was mostly a rural country. And so Russian intelligentsia, or intelligentsia, if you want to use the wrong pronunciation, they looked at German literature and French literature essentially as the examples to follow. Like, we are not worth this much. Like, this is what we should be able to do, but we are not capable enough. But at this time, like during Dostoevsky's time, there were a lot of other authors like Tolstoy and Gogol. And I'm sorry if like my pronunciation is awful, but yeah.
No, I think it's fine.
Okay. Anyway, they started producing like really high quality literature, but you can tell that in their stories, there's always like this kind of complex of like inferiority. And for example, Dostoevsky is always quoting Goethe as an example of like amazing literature, and is like, you can really see this, for example, in Brothers Karamazov, where he talks at length about Russian culture and how, you know, people in Russia, they want to be like Europeans, but, you know, that's stupid. They're not Europeans. They should focus on like Russian identity and Russian culture. So in a way, it was kind of a little bit of a nationalist in that sense. But, you know, it's so conflicted and so hypocritical, and it's so amazing. And I love everything about it. Because as you said, like, he had the gambling addiction. He was kind of like super religious. And again, if you read Brother Karamazov, like the hero in Brother Karamazov is like this super religious boy, and he goes at length to talk about like, you know, the church and like what's good and what's right about religion. But then on the other hand, he was gambling, and he was divorcing, and he was drinking, and like, he's amazing, and I love him. And yeah, everyone should read Dostoevsky, please.
I didn't know he loved him so much. So one day I have to say the writing is very easy to read. Like, even though it's so old.
Really?
Like, yeah, okay. I thought so. Like, compared to, I don't know, The Prince from Machiavelli, which we will talk about someday. So that's not a fair comparison at all. But I mean, you'd think it would be more dated feeling, like more, I don't know. Maybe it was as nicely translated because I didn't read it in Russian. I read it in English.
Okay.
But I have to say, it's not difficult to read at all. It's just, I was worried, and it was very easy to read.
Okay, that's good.
So the first short story we've read is called Dream of a Ridiculous Man. We're going to do like a quick non-spoiler to hopefully help you decide if you want to read this. I would recommend it because I was very surprised how quickly it went by, and it was kind of an interesting thought that people go through. I think everybody in their life sometimes has this kind of a feeling. It's like a moody, like Paolo said, self-deprecating, wallow in your sorrow and be very sad about stuff and appreciate the despair, which kind of helps me feel less sad sometimes with these things, because it helps, you know, it's in the name, it's ridiculous to have this kind of thought process. And I felt like if you're really sad and feeling really bad about yourself, maybe this puts it in a perspective that helps you see it more clearly and not be so sad about your life or something. That's how I took it.
Okay. Well, to me, one of the reasons why I recommended this, other than the title, which is amazing, is that in kind of like, so my thought process was kind of the same as what I did when we did the Lovecraft short stories. I think this is a good window into Dostoevsky's style. Dostoevsky's books are, generally speaking, pretty long, and I understand if people are kind of like wary of starting to read them. So I think this is a very, very easy way to get an idea. It's kind of like it's like a tester at the supermarket.
Yep.
Yeah, and it touches on some of this and the other story. They touch on some of the main topics which will be brought up in most Dostoevsky stories. Also, in this case, as you mentioned, like there is a self-deprecation, and to me, like this is one of the classic like Dostoevsky characters who thinks way too hard about something which probably people shouldn't be thinking so hard about.
Yep.
In a way, he is completely disconnected with the world, and it feels like he has completely given up on everything. Like, it doesn't feel like he literally has given up on everything. At the same time, though, in a way, this might lead the character to have like a sense of superiority towards everyone else. But at the same time, he also has this kind of like, he puts himself like below everyone. Like he says that since he's born, he was a ridiculous person. Like, and he calls himself a ridiculous man. And the way Dostoevsky is able to present these contradicting facets of the same character is one of the things I love about him the most.
Yeah, so I think we recommend it. It's only 32 pages, and if you want a bite-sized sample of Dostoevsky in a supermarket, this is the thing to do.
Yeah.
So if you don't want to read the spoilers, skip. You can see the timestamps in the description of this episode.
Yeah.
So the plot is super simple. It's a man walking on the street, thinking about his life and how desperate he is, meets a girl, makes him think about all kinds of things.
He says that since he was born, like he essentially was kind of a loner, and he couldn't understand other people because he had a very, in a way, very pragmatic way of view on life. Like he could definitely not live in Japan, because he says that the night the story happens, like he was having dinner with some friends and they were talking about something, but they didn't really care about it. They were just talking like to make conversation and to be polite to each other.
Yeah.
And he literally tells them like, you don't care about this stuff. Why are you even debating this? He says that he had bought a revolver because he was planning to kill himself. However, he hadn't done it yet because he thought he would find a night where he really didn't care about anything. On that day, he would kill himself. That's the decision he takes. And that night he meets this girl, and this girl is desperate. This child is desperate because she wants to find someone who can help her mother, and he refuses to help her, even though he realizes he should. And he even kind of a tantrum, like he says, he stomps his foot on the floor because he really doesn't want to help her. So he goes home and he understands, this is the time I really stopped caring about everything. Like I should have helped her, and I didn't because I really don't care about humanity anymore. So he goes home and is like, yeah, tonight I'm going to shoot myself. Instead, he falls asleep.
Yeah, so he like keeps looking at the gun on the table, and he's sitting in front of it, and he's waiting for like the moment of highest despair, and then he's gonna shoot himself, but he falls asleep, which is ridiculous.
Yeah, in his dream he sees God or something like God.
He sees all kinds of crap. So it starts with him like thinking about all these bad things and how like life doesn't make sense and everything's horrible and everything's bad and he's the worst person and blah blah blah. And then at one point it switches to like either a god or some creature or something, and he's taken into space. So that's where I was like, yes.
yeah. I thought like Philip definitely will love the space traveling part. Yeah.
So he traveled into space to another planet. I was like, yes, tell me more.
Where are the three Solarans? Is the three Solaran fleet already on his way?
So they go to this like other planet, and he has all these existential questions about, do all those people on this other planet, are they even people? Do they even have the same problems? Are they also depressed? It made me laugh. I was like, how is this thought process? I was like, I'm going into space with God. I'm arriving to a different planet after a long journey. What's my first question? Are they also depressed?
Well, I mean, it makes sense. He was about to shoot himself, so that's what he was thinking about.
Yeah.
So he reaches this other planet, which is exactly like Earth. So he lands somewhere in Greece, or what looks like Greece. And on this planet, apparently, everyone is happy and there's no jealousy, no violence. It's essentially like kind of like a Garden of Eden. He screws everything up.
It was so funny to me. I was like, I wonder what's going to happen now.
So he introduces lie, like a lie, as a joke, and people understand that the people of this planet understand that lying is something you can actually do, and so they started lying to each other, and they started lying. They create like jealousy, and they started becoming angry and violent, and so they started having conflict and weapons. And they create science, and they industrialize. Their whole Garden of Eden ends.
That was interesting. It felt like an episode of Star Trek.
Really, to me, it felt like Futurama, but
it felt like it was very interesting because I went into it with, is it going to be depressing, wallow in your sorrow, and like enjoy despair? Of course. And then I was surprised they're going into space and thinking about something else than dying. And then I was surprised it's kind of funny, which I didn't expect. Kind of like a dark humor thing. And then it had kind of like a point to it. So I liked it.
Yeah.
The only thing I didn't like was the very, very ending.
Okay.
So he wakes up after everything goes to hell, and all the people on the other planet started killing each other, and everything was corrupt and super bad, and he blamed himself, of course. We come back
but he says he doesn't regret it.
Which is another like joke, because why would you suddenly be so overconfident about this? And then he wakes up and he's like, oh my god, my life has changed, I'm a new man, I'm not going to kill myself, life is beautiful. And
he wants to spread the message, like he learned something in this dream, and he wants everyone to know about it.
Which is a very cliche ending, but put in such a way, it's almost like a self-deprecating, like commenting on itself joke.
He's a ridiculous man, right?
So I appreciate the undertones and like the layers of meaning, which I don't know are intentional. Hopefully, yes. Hopefully, I'm not like looking into things too much, but it felt like he knew what he was doing, and he knew people would expect this would be the ending, and he kind of put it in such a ridiculous way. It's kind of clever, so I like it. But I didn't like that after this happens, he goes and looks for this girl that cried on the street, and he wants to like find her, help her. What a creep! Don't like, what the fuck? Like,
he couldn't find her. He says that he could never find her. She's safe. Sorry, looking at my notes, there is something I wanted to say, which is the lack of sense of guilt for him spreading like lies into the planet, to me was extremely interesting, because clearly like the end society is like our current society, or I guess Dostoevsky current society. So to me it's kind of like in a way to say that we want like this Garden of Eden like world, but actually what we really want is just to ruin everything. And we enjoy the mud we live in.
Okay. That's depressing.
Well, I mean, in kind of like in an ironic way, right? Sorry, I ruined your good mood.
No. It makes sense. I'm just always trying to, look at something positive, and you're always looking at something sad. So
I'm sorry.
I think that's why. Hopefully this podcast is interesting, because we always have like this fight. So that was the first one. We'd recommend it. It was much, much better than I expected. Although I did expect people will kill themselves, which they didn't. So I started reading the second story we decided to read, and I was like, is somebody going to kill themselves? So let's not talk about it yet. But the name is A Gentle Creature, and or the meek one, or meek creature, what is it?
The meek one.
Meek one. So this one I was like, okay, I'm curious where this goes. I was hoping for some sort of I didn't hope they would go to space again, but I was hoping aliens
there would at
arrive,
least be like some hint at aliens, right?
Yes. No, I was hoping for some moment of, I don't know, like an opinion about this, or commentary on this, or maybe like a joke again on the situation or something. But it was super serious and super like dry, I felt. And the narrator, who is like a mad person, I didn't like him. Like I didn't like the way he was speaking. I didn't like the way he was presenting the story, even though it was kind of original. And I didn't get much out of it other than it was well written. I didn't get bored bored at all. I was just like, where is this going? Oh, of course. Okay, done. It was kind of my feeling.
So I would say this. This one, I think it introduces the type of characters Dostoevsky uses in his stories. You know, the guy who was discharged from the army as went through like some really bad times. The girl who comes from a very, very poor family and who's an orphan. You know, poverty and greed and arrogance and pride. Like these people who, you know, they go through all of these bad things, and despite that, they find no time for empathy or for gentleness and kindness towards others. Essentially, they're so deep into their own pride and selfish needs that they don't understand how much they're hurting each other.
Yeah, for that season, it's a good example.
Yeah.
Did you remember this story for any other reason? Like, did you like it a lot when you first read it?
Well, I really like the style of the narration because, so this is narrated from essentially as if the main character is telling you the story and you're in front of him and time is passing by as he's telling you the story, and at one point he goes to sleep or something like that. And he's clearly like shocked and confused, so sometimes he goes on tangents or like he repeats the same thing. I think that's very interesting. I mean, it's not excessively unique. But
I like that. Yeah, I was just like, how to be depressed 101. Like, it's like... This made me think like, yeah, life sucks. Some people have it bad and there's not much to do. And even when you try to help it, it's even worse.
So in my notes, I simply wrote universal despair. Which I think applies more to the first story, but in a way also to this one.
I was thinking at the first story, and this one especially, I kept like thinking, why does Paolo like this word? Like why? And then secondly, why does he love despair so hard? Don't kill yourself. Don't be so sad, please. There's nice things in life. And I understand it's somehow fascinating or comforting or like soothing even.
Yeah, if you read these books, be aware.
Yeah, I feel like if I was in a bad place in life, it wouldn't help me much, or I don't know.
To me, a story like this one would probably help me.
Okay.
A story like Journey Through the End of the Night probably would not.
Okay, I see. So before we get into spoilers, I wouldn't recommend this one. I would think it's not bad. Yeah, I wouldn't. I think it's not bad, but I didn't get much out of it. Like I didn't. There was like a few good moments, scenes, and it was like very dramatic and very interestingly told. But other than that, I was like, okay, I don't see the point. Like,
I mean, for me, of course, I would recommend it. I recommended it to you. But if you want to again get a taste of what reading, for example, Brother Karamazov or some of the other books, if you want to read some of those books, this is a taste of what you would get.
Okay, so now you killed it. I don't want to read it anymore. Have you read Kafka?
I have never read Kafka.
Don't read. Well, maybe read it. It reminded me a little bit of how I felt about that. I hate it so much.
Okay.
I mean, this is like tastefully depressing to describe it, and Kafka is like aggressively depressing, beat you in the ground and feel horrible. Like you're sick, you read this and you get worse kind of deal.
Okay. As the Czech representative, this is kind of harsh on your part.
It's awful.
Okay.
It just crushes you in all the ways imaginable. Just so sad and bad and disgusting and just feel horrible. Who wants to do that?
Maybe I should read it.
Yes. Oh my God. One day. Episode 500. I'm not doing it earlier.
Okay.
Alright, so if you want to read this one, skip to the other timestamp to hear the glorious cocksucker discussion. Ckraiser, sorry. If you want to get spoiled, keep listening. This one is, like we said, told from the point of view of somebody who's in despair, very much erratic and all over the place. And what happened is that he's a pawnbroker. So he's got the job and he's talking to customers, and he's got this recurring customer who's like a small girl, and we learn about her backstory and his backstory and how they got together and what happened to them. I'm not sure how much like in detail we should get, but I have a few points I want to ask you. Maybe you'll change my point of view about this, because maybe I didn't get it, or maybe I was just tired. There was like a few moments I wasn't sure. Like what was supposed to be, not what happened, but what was supposed to be like read in between the lines, so to speak.
Like the meaning behind it.
Yeah.
Okay.
So the guy keeps like looking at this small girl who carries in things to get money for, and he keeps wondering why she needs the money and what happened to her. And then we learn that she is to be wed to some awful person who beat two of his ex-wife to death.
Yeah.
Which is awful, and he's like, oh my god, it's terrible, and the people who are taking care of the girl don't care about her at all, and they don't give her anything, and she keeps taking money to just pay off things that she needs to pay off. And so he's like trying to give her a little bit more money or something, help her, until eventually he decides to marry her so she doesn't have to marry the other awful person. And she is like 15 or something, I forget.
Yeah, I think she was like 16 and he was like 40.
And he's got like this idealized image how he's going to save her life and how she's going to help her and everything. Surprise, she's bored and doesn't like that at all. And like, of course, she's grateful he helped her, but as they live together, we go over a period of time, which I wasn't sure how long that was, like how long they lived together.
Yeah, it's not really explained, but it's not really important, I guess.
But eventually she starts to wander off because she doesn't have much to do, and he's not really like somebody she would talk to about something she would be interested in, I guess, because the generation gap is so huge. And she goes to visit this other guy. I wrote his name, Mr. Efimovich. So he used to be in the military with this pawnbroker, and I was like, how did she find him? Why? Don't explain. Strange coincidence. Let's say that happened. So the pawnbroker, he hears about that and he follows her, and he has a gun. I guess he got the gun from the shop because somebody sold the gun. I don't know how.
Well, he had a gun because like for safety.
So this is the part I didn't understand. Like, what was the significance? Why did it happen? What even happened? Like so she goes away again to meet this guy, Efimovich, and the pawnbroker follows her with a gun. So what does he want to do? I'm not sure. And then he overhears them talking about stuff, and the things they were talking about, he doesn't really explain. And then he barges in there, and they have like a confrontation with this other guy, and they argue a bunch, and it boils down to Efimovich saying, okay, I'm an idiot, she wants to be with me anyway, get out. And he's like, doesn't matter, I'm thinking her, she's my wife. And they go away and they go home. And I was like, what happened? Like, what did they talk about? Why was it important?
Okay. So the military guy was trying to seduce her, and she essentially wasn't having it.
Okay.
Because he's not a nice guy. Like she doesn't really like him. So when the main character, when the narrator is spying on them, he's really trying to make his move, and she keeps rebuking him. He's really proud of her. And he's like the other guy, the military guy, was getting pretty angry. So he barges in, and the military guy is like, well, you're a coward. Something that the wife has learned. He was discharged with dishonor because he refused to fight a duel. My cat starts meowing.
It's to balance out the despair, so we can have some cuteness in the background while we talk about death and killing yourself.
Anyway. So the main character refused to fight this duel. So everyone looked at him as a coward, and he is very angry about it. Also, he's very angry that his wife might think he's a coward.
Yeah. So was I supposed to like get something out of this? Like,
so this is not really about the fact itself. This is a way to show first his insecurity. In his own eyes, he was actually a coward. And he didn't fight the duel because he was scared. He kept telling himself like this excuse that he didn't do it because he was stupid, which by the way was true. But actually he was actually scared, and he didn't want to do it. You know, it's kind of an example to show him that he's a very insecure person. Because throughout the story, like what destroys their marriage is that first, as you said, when he married her, he expected like her to see him as the savior, like, oh, yes. He saved me, so I will be his hero, and I will raise my own self-esteem through that. But I will not be like a loving husband, because, you know, she has to be grateful to me anyway, so I would be like really kind of strict and stoic. And it completely fails to understand that she never saw him that way. Like, yeah, she was grateful to him for saving her from the other guy who was beating his wives to death. But at the same time, never saw him as a hero, like saw him like as a selfish person. Even like at the beginning, like when he proposes to her, he realizes that she thinks about it. She doesn't just jump into it and it's like, oh yeah, please save me. Oh, this is the greatest thing in my life. She's like, do I really want to do this? I guess. Like it's better than, and he even realizes that she was thinking like, should be beaten to death a better way to end this quickly.
I didn't get it. I didn't take it that far, but
no, he like the main character thinks that, like, because she was hesitating, and so he thinks, oh, is that what she's thinking, that like being beaten to death is like a better fate, so she can just get over with this life. And what I really like is the way Dostoevsky describes poor people. To me, one of the best things he does as a writer, as an author, and something that I think even most contemporary authors really struggle to do. And you see this all the time, for example, in comics or in movies, where like there is the guy who raises from the bottom. I think they do a very, I don't want to say a poor job at describing poor people, but they do a job which works for the narrative of the story of the movie or like book or whatever, but it doesn't really say anything about how the people who have the least in society actually feel and live their life. And I think Dostoevsky does an amazing job at that. And
that's a good point. Yes.
He portrays these people where like, they have nothing. Like she was, again, really ready to be beaten to death by these horrible people. This horrible person, but she still has a lot of pride, and she still has her stubbornness, and she's not willing to give up everything just because all of a sudden, like, someone is offering her a better opportunity in her life. So to me, like, this is so interesting. It's so engrossing.
It is very real. Yeah, you're right. I didn't think about it that way. Yeah, it's very well depicted poor people. That's a good point.
That's definitely true.
So to continue the story, he takes her back after the argument with Mr. Efimovich, the other guy. And then we have this dramatic scene where he is sleeping on a couch and she comes in and she takes the gun and she points it at him, and he wakes up and then he pretends to fall back asleep immediately, and he has this like over explanation to himself how people sometimes wake up and fall back asleep without realizing, and then it's completely insuspicious.
Yeah, that was kind of weird.
So he's like, oh no, I didn't see that. And then he's like not moving and trying to pretend he's sleeping, and she's standing there and like contemplating if she's gonna shoot him in the face, and then she doesn't, so she goes away. And he buys her a new bed, and he like sets up a new room for her.
Yeah, essentially they become estranged. And
then she falls sick for reasons.
Yeah, that's okay. This is like 19th century literature. People, when they have psychological problems, they become physically sick. So they always have like this nervous sickness or something like that.
Okay. I was thinking of Star Wars, how
yeah, exactly.
Died of sadness.
Yes, that's exactly the same, which is why like so many people hate it. I love it. That's so perfect.
Okay, it's funny you say that, but yeah. So she he pays off all the doctors, and she doesn't get better. Yeah. So this goes on for a while, and then he keeps mumbling because the narrative is from his point of view, and that's basically, we come back to the start of the book, how the tragedy happens, and he's so guilty, and he keeps saying like he would have come 5 minutes earlier and all this, and of course he didn't even have to say what happened, and we find out that the girl jumped up the window and killed herself, and that's it.
Well, the thing was, at the end, because she was singing one day after they had been estranged for such a long time, she was singing, and he realizes, oh, this person actually has beauty in her and is a real person. And he finally realizes, oh, I've been a dick. I've been a dick like my whole life to her, like our whole married life. And
bonus depression points.
So, wow, I'm a terrible person. I should probably behave like in a better way. So I'm gonna take her on a holiday to France. And we're going to go to the beach, and it's going to be wonderful. But of course, she's kind of shocked by this sudden change in him. And he believes that, she was close to accepting him again, and, things would have been fine. She didn't really want to commit suicide, but she had a really bad 10 minutes and so she did it. That's what he thinks. I'm not sure that that's actually what happened because he's very self-absorbed. But when he finally decided to be a better husband, things kind of fell apart.
So are we supposed to think that he is at fault for everything? Like he drove her to do it, and it's.
He's definitely at fault for everything, but at the same time, like he was clearly the bad person, like in this relationship, right? Because from the beginning, he expected her to worship him. He wanted to submit her. He wanted to do all of these horrible things, and in general, he was a very bad husband. Like he wouldn't talk to her and things like that. But at the same time, like you could say that she never really makes any attempt to create a better relationship with him. And in general, it was never clear whether she was open to being happy in this wedding or in this marriage or not. Because right at the beginning, he says they were happy, but how long that lasted and was it real?
Didn't believe that at all.
So clearly she's the victim, but at the same time, like in another story, like in a Disney story, she would behave differently. Like she would be the victim by being a better person, and she's not. She's the victim, so you sympathize like with her position, but at the same time, she's not a good person. Like being a victim doesn't make her a good person. Yeah,
that's true. So I don't regret reading it. It wasn't difficult to read. It's interesting style for how old it is. It's very well written. And even though the story is super short, I feel like the characters are characters, unlike other books we shall not mention. And they have a character arc, and they are very realistically described. So yeah, it's not bad. It was both stories very much better than I expected, I have to say. So thanks for recommending them.
I'm glad, and I am really glad that you didn't hate them. I was kind of afraid.
Yeah, of course. I never hate it. Well, I hate Prince from Machiavelli, kind of. I still think it's gonna be fun to talk about it, hopefully one day. Right, so I guess that's it for this episode.
There is the long-awaited.
Yeah. So for people. For people who skipped to this timestamp, welcome back. For people who stayed until now, listened to us about Dostoevsky, goodbye. Because we're going to talk about the long-awaited sequel to Hellraiser. In the previous episode, if you haven't listened, we talked about 10 movies, 10 sequels of Hellraiser, based on the book Hellbound Heart we talked about. And Paolo corrected me that I missed one. And it's called ckraiser. So I watched the story. I know what it's about in detail. Did
I didn't watch it. It didn't look particularly interesting, even though it has one of my favorite actresses.
What? Okay. I didn't recognize anybody, but I was genuinely interested, and at first I was intrigued. It was going for it very much. They went into the same house, and they kind of like made jokes out of it, because if you know in the original story, there is Frank, he dies in this room, and then he gets resurrected, and horror happens. But so in this, they came into this, they like moved into a new house, and the husband was like, yeah, I heard somebody died in this room. Why don't you go in there and check it out? It's fun. She was like, yeah, of course. And he said, while you do that, I'm gonna fuck some door handles. And I was like, excuse me? What do you mean by that? So I guess he like took off the door handles, like the doorknobs, and then like fucked the hole out.
Yeah, I guess that was like a joke.
Okay, so she went outside and she kept hearing voices, and then he came back to check on her, and he said, yeah, these door holes, they're so exciting. I almost jizzed my pants. And then he actually jizzed his pants. And as you might expect, what do you think happens next? The jizz spills on the floor and seeks through the wood. And like in the original story, the character got revived because blood was spilled on the floor, and he was like absorbing the blood. So as you might expect, a giant dick is materialized because the sperm revived it through the wooden floor, and nothing else is there, just the dick on the floor. And he's like, my body has been revived, the most important part. It is already functional, and if you give me more sperm, I will revive more. No, basically the same story.
Awesome.
So then I was curious where it goes, but it doesn't go anywhere. They completely...
Well, I guess we can all guess where it goes.
No, obviously, but I meant like this is like the beginning scene, so I hope there will be like more story, but they completely just like give up after this one. Horrible. I've done
Is
my
it
homework.
better or worse, or like are there worse Hellraiser sequels?
Yes.
Yes? Okay. Good.
If you want to know how much worse they are, please listen to our previous episode 21. So I hope you enjoyed this contrast in tone after Dostoevsky. And thank you for listening. If you're still here.
Thank you for coming, as they probably said in ckraiser.
Oh my god. Thank you very much for listening. Rate us on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, and on the next episode, we are getting together with Paul, Adam, and Martin, each of us bring up a book, until I derail the podcast completely with a modern classic. It's a book only a real man can understand.